How can you make sure that your hormone levels are where they're supposed to be? Today, you're going to learn from the food freedom and fertility expert, Lindsey Lusson, about what damages female hormone health, how to eat to regain your period, the dangers of undereating, and the role that fat plays in our hormone health, and more. Lindsey Lusson is a registered dietitian, a mom of 3, and she's known as the food freedom and fertility expert. She didn't always have a great relationship with food, however, and she didn't have a natural period for literally over a decade. So when she and her husband decided that they wanted to start building a family, she didn't know where to begin. Luckily, through her research, she learned about something called hypothalamic amenorrhea, or HA for short. And then she stopped exercising, started eating more, and was pregnant naturally 3 months later. Today, you're going to learn all about how to exercise and what to eat in order to ensure that you have proper hormone health. Again, if you're listening on the Apple Podcast app or on Spotify, make sure you hit follow. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. But for now, it's time to get closer to your best you with Lindsey Lusson. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best You Podcast. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Lindsey Lusson. Lindsey, today we're going to talk all about how to optimize hormone health. Yes, for people who are looking to get pregnant, but kind of just generally in women, for women in general. I really want to get on today. And I know that exercise is going to be one of the first things that we talk about. I know that over-exercising can be a big mistake or a lot of a source of a lot of different issues that a lot of people deal with. But I kind of want to give a little bit of context for people. I know you dealt with hypothalamic amenorrhea, HA for short, a number of years ago, and you didn't have a natural period for over a decade. And then you learned about HA after reading a book, and you made some changes. And then after basically 3 months, it sounds like you were pregnant naturally, despite having been told that you were going to have to do a fertility treatment to start a family. And I know that the primary causes from doing some research of HA are undereating, over-exercising, and stress, and kind of just different stressful situations in general. But today, like I said, I want to start with the exercising side of things because I'm a fitness trainer. I love exercise. A lot of people who are listening to this are maybe my clients or they just love exercise as well. And so how do we know if we're potentially doing too much exercise or not?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it will vary some depending upon the person. Like when it comes to your hormones being in balance, like, yes, you can over exercise, but a lot of it has to do with the balance of what you're taking in through food and what you're expending through exercise. So when I work with clients that are experiencing fertility issues or hormone imbalance issues related to low energy availability, and I like to use that word because it makes more sense because a lot of active women are eating what I think like society would consider enough. But then when we kind of start comparing what they're expending through exercise and training in their sport to calorically what they're eating, it doesn't add up. And that's really kind of the main source of the issue. But, for women who are not on hormonal birth control, so this is hard to do if you are on birth control, but you can pay attention to your cycle. If you are an active woman and your cycle is irregular, like you have no idea when your period is coming, or if you aren't on birth control and you're tracking your cycle and you realize that you're not ovulating or, you're not getting the signs that your body's doing what it's supposed to, I usually encourage women to start thinking about their training and their exercise routine. And probably the biggest red flags that kind of come up are people who don't take rest days like at all, right? Like you're like the type of person and you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't remember the last time that I actually like took a day off exercise, or that's really hard for you. I think that rest days are so important as part of an exercise routine. Like we can't actually build muscle and make gains if we are constantly stressing our bodies. So that's a biggie is if you never take rest days. And then if you're able to track your cycle, a lot of times like it will show up in your cycle that you're overtraining.
Like you said, rest days are absolutely key. It's not just a matter of if you're over exercising, it's a matter of if you're combining that with potentially under eating. And so we'll dive more into that here in a little bit. But with regards to rest days, I know that there's a lot of women who, and like guys too, it's not just women, but who think like, oh my gosh, if I take a day off, I'm going to get fat. Or if I take a day off or a couple of days off, like I'm going to see the difference in the mirror. And like, I think sometimes we can trick ourselves into thinking that we're seeing a difference in the mirror, maybe because we're not sore or we didn't just have a big sweat or something like that, but it's not really, there's any actual changes. What would you say to somebody who feels that way, who feels like I don't want to take any rest days because I know I'm going to see a difference in the mirror, but that's not the actual truth? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I would say that like your body changes very little day to day. So like if it's Friday and you feel fantastic and you feel like, you're really making progress in the gym and you feel very confident, and then the next day is Saturday and you feel horrible, like nothing really changed about your body. However, your perception of your body image can change minute to minute, hour to hour, right? And so if that's a fear preventing you from giving your body the rest that it needs to be healthy, that's something to really take a step back and think about the fact that like our physique isn't everything. Like it's not wrong to want to be strong and to see, change in body composition. But I do think that there's a fine line between chasing those goals and letting those goals drive everything that you do and getting your body out of alignment.
Yeah, no doubt about that. To go back on the point where you said it depends on the person, it's about the balance of the food that's coming in and then what you're burning from exercise. Is there any like science or research that talks about maybe like how much of a caloric deficit for how long is like, okay, that's when it really starts to become an issue? If you're really burning like 1,000 more calories than you're actually consuming for a period of 2 months or 4 months or 6 months, that's when you really start to experience some negative side effects.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say in my clients that experience amenorrhea, they are in very large calorie deficits. So maybe, 700 to 1,000 calorie deficits per day consistently. I don't know if there's a magic number, but like, I think most trainers and nutrition coaches and registered dietitians would agree that like, we kind of want, if somebody has like a fat loss goal, we kind of want them in like the smallest deficit possible for the shortest amount of time possible that can get them X, Y, and Z result, right? So like, I think we can all agree that like nobody should be in a 700,000 calorie, 15,000 calorie deficit. Like that is not good for a person. They cannot get the fuel that they need. They're going to feel horrible. And so, yes, these large calorie deficits can be very damaging for hormones, and also the length of time that somebody's in a deficit. So even if you're in a minor calorie deficit, depending upon the person, some people's bodies are just more sensitive, right? Like some people can diet and exercise too much and it'll never impact their period. They'll never lose it, right? Like some people just have a little bit scrappier genes, if you will. But some of us can. And I think the more extreme that we get with the deficits, the more likely we'll start to see those things happen.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, if you are going for a body composition goal and you're wanting to drop some body fat, like you said, you want to be able to like kind of cut this as few of calories as possible so that you can see progress for a short period of time. And then never should you be in one phase for an excessive period of time either. Like you want to vary it up or down, right? Like if you're spending time in a 300, 400, 500 calorie deficit for X number of weeks, you want to go back to kind of a more maintenance period. So you're making sure that you're not kind of degrading or breaking down any kind of muscle. You're making sure that your metabolic rate isn't dropping off too severely or anything like that. So I love that. I guess kind of on that topic, since we're already there, what is your stance or your experience with intermittent fasting for women? And I guess intermittent fasting is such a complicated topic because it's not just a matter of like physical, it's also psychological. I guess I'll just let you run with it. What's your experience with intermittent fasting for women? I guess with specifically regard to like hormone.
Yeah. I think it depends on the person because there is some newer. So first of all, intermittent fasting, most of the research was done in men. So when we extrapolate, oh, there's all these health benefits and we apply it to women, it's like apples and oranges. It just doesn't compute. For most women, they probably won't do great with intermittent fasting because we're just more sensitive. Our hormones are just more sensitive to, like we talked about, the prolonged calorie deficit. We're just more sensitive to blood sugar swings. For whatever reason, men seem to do a really great job with like skipping breakfast and then, just eating a big meal for lunch and dinner. And like, they are totally fine. Women were just a little bit more sensitive. There is a small percentage of women who might be like battling insulin resistance, who might benefit from a very controlled fasting window. But the vast majority of us, especially women that are physically active and not dealing with any sort of insulin resistant, we're going to do better with constant energy intake all throughout the day. And there is evidence that fasting alone can cause women to have anovulatory cycles and can lead to amenorrhea or period loss in some women.
What is it that's going on inside of the body that makes it so like more regular meal timing rather than intermittent fasting is more appropriate or more oftentimes healthier for hormones?
A lot of it has to do with kind of the brain and ovary communication. So there's this axis called the HPO, hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. And that axis in some individuals can be very sensitive to blood sugar levels and in particular the hormone insulin. So one of the reasons why eating more and eating in a surplus works for bringing periods back is because the body needs to sense a certain level of glucose in the blood to have that communication pathway reestablished. So it is knowing that, it is my, guess that even if somebody doesn't totally lose their period, that communication pathway is sensitive to the low energy availability or the prolonged time without food, without carbohydrates.
The hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, is that right?
The HPO axis, and like more probably appropriately named the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So men and women, that would be like the non binary name for it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you talk about that. I was just doing some research on alcohol and its effects on health and stuff, and there's something that called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that alcohol impacts a lot as well. So I guess give me a little bit more. So you're saying that the HPO axis, it's more sensitive to blood sugar levels. So if you're consistently having low blood sugar levels, then that communication pathway becomes less and less active, and therefore your hormone levels.
Yeah, the signaling can become too weak to properly, like when we talk about a menstrual cycle, the signaling, the LH signaling can be too weak to properly grow and develop a follicle to support getting the body to ovulate regularly. And sometimes we see like weak ovulation. So maybe it's a good mature follicle, but the mechanism for creating progesterone is just not there. It's just not strong enough. And so this is where we kind of start to see like low level infertility stuff coming up in active women. Maybe people are getting periods, but they aren't ovulating, or maybe they are ovulating, but their luteal phase, their second half of their cycle is too short and their bodies don't have enough progesterone to support getting pregnant and staying pregnant.
Okay, gotcha. So let's kind of transition into more of the specifics of, I guess, proper nutrient intake, proper nutrition for hormone health. And let's start with somebody who doesn't have maybe many hormone issues that they know of right now. They don't have PCOS, or they don't have HA or anything like that. What does, just generally speaking, in your eyes, what does a well-balanced or healthy meal plan or nutrition guidelines look like for appropriate hormone health?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to start with like the foundation of nutritional adequacy. So making sure that you are consuming enough energy to support the activity that you're doing. And then from there, we want to make sure that our diet is balanced, and that can mean different things to different people. But I think in the most simplest ways that we can think about it, especially probably for your audience who's familiar, is thinking about like, do you have all of your macros at each meal and snack? Are there carbs, protein, and fat? And making sure that those are relatively balanced. I don't think we necessarily need to like cross over in the line of like tracking everything down to the gram, but like when you're thinking about your meals, like, hey, is there a source of carbohydrate? Is there, enough fat? And if somebody is coming from a background of dieting or counting and restricting, sometimes it can be hard to get people to have the proper portions. So, it's kind of an if you're not experiencing any hormone imbalance issues, I will say there's a lot of nuance and you kind of have to figure out like what works for you. But, eating consistently at least 3 meals per day, anywhere between 1 and 3 snacks, depending upon your activity level. And then making sure that you're not like totally excluding one of those kind of major macronutrients.
Mm-hmm. I feel like oftentimes if we're talking about somebody who might be generally undereating, that might be somebody who is reading the labels and looking for low calorie type foods. Oftentimes those are going to be foods that are maybe lower in fat. And I've frequently heard that a lower consumption of fat can be potentially damaging or dangerous with regards to hormone levels. What role does fat play with regards to maintaining appropriate hormone levels?
Yeah, well, fat is kind of a building block for our hormones. So when we talk about how our hormones are made, they're actually synthesized from cholesterol. And so if somebody has a really low fat diet, their body may not have like the proper building blocks to make hormones. So that can definitely be a huge barrier. I'd say in addition to that, fat is our most calorie dense macro, right? So when somebody is eating really low fat, they are kind of by proxy also eating low calorie and putting their body at risk for being in an energy deficit.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about how fat's a building block for hormones. You say it's synthesized by cholesterol. I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what cholesterol is with regards to especially like blood work and cholesterol in certain foods and stuff like that. Can you just go off on a little bit of a tangent on kind of what cholesterol is, the role it's played in our body, and how that relates to maybe traditionally high cholesterol foods, if you will?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a difference between the cholesterol that our body makes naturally internally and the dietary cholesterol that we consume through food. So old school advice, sometimes this is still floating around today, but I feel like we've pretty much pushed this away in most circles. Your dietary cholesterol intake from eggs, from butter, from animal products really doesn't have a gigantic impact on your blood cholesterol levels. So like if your doctor is telling you, oh, your cholesterol is high, you need to stop eating eggs. Like, don't stop eating eggs. That's not really where we want to spend our time. There's lots of great nutrition in that. The cholesterol that we have in our blood that our body makes naturally is used to make hormones. And if somebody has hypothalamic amenorrhea, or like in men, especially in like the active men community, sometimes it's called relative energy deficit in sport, or RED-S, with that low energy availability, they may not be making hormones. Like if somebody had low testosterone, for instance, they may not be making hormones in the proper amounts, and therefore their blood cholesterol might be higher, because we kind of just have this extra cholesterol that should be used to make hormones. It's just kind of hanging out in the bloodstream. So that's something I see a lot in my clients with amenorrhea, is they're like, I eat so healthy, I exercise all the time, but my cholesterol is high. Like, what do I do? Or I'm scared to eat more fat because I'm afraid that it's going to impact my cholesterol levels. And it's like, well, no, we got to get your body back in balance, because if we have high cholesterol and we're not having a period, we can kind of 2 birds, 1 stone in getting your period back, correct the cholesterol issue.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm glad you touched on that. I think a lot of us still have a lack of awareness around the difference between dietary cholesterol and blood cholesterol. When it comes to, or I guess let's transition back to the nutrition. That's kind of, if we have normal hormone levels, if somebody does have hormone levels that are a little bit off. I know that you personally have kind of crafted a period recovery meal plan, and that might be applicable to some people with inappropriate hormone levels, and maybe more appropriate for those people than others. I'm not sure, but talk to us about, if somebody does have hormone levels that are off, what is the path look like nutrition wise to get back to appropriate levels?
Yeah. Well, and I also want to throw in here that like nutrition is a big part of it. Like that is the foundation. And like if you are not eating enough, you won't get your period back. Like you do have to eat enough. But I also want to bring in, stress because that's a really important part too. And a lot of times people are thinking, oh, well, I'm not getting, my doctor says I'm not getting my cycle or I can't get pregnant because I'm too stressed. Well, if you are in we'll circle back to our 1,000 calorie deficit, your body is stressed. Like being in a calorie deficit increases your cortisol levels. So in nourishing properly, you're addressing the stress component, but we also too have to think about how much you're expending and how intense you're training. And for a lot of people, those things do have to temporarily change in order to bring their bodies back into balance. We also look at stress management. A lot of people that are losing their period also are in like high performing, high stress jobs. And so while I never tell anybody to quit their job, sometimes we have to get those things under control as well. But from a nutrition perspective in particular, since your population probably is familiar with calories or this is speaking their language, we want to talk about calories of around 2,500 calories per day minimum. And that's typically for people who are making changes with their exercise. So if somebody is, hey, I want to get my period back, but like I am not changing my exercise routine. You can't pay me enough money in the world. We need to go up. We probably need to start our kind of baseline at 3,000 calories. And, I also understand that a lot of times when people are missing their period, they might be eating half that amount. So it can be a big mindset shift to really think that you need to really do that. But that number, Nick, comes from the average amount of calories consumed by active women with healthy menstrual cycles. So it's not like we're kind of just like pulling this number out of thin air and that, this is just some arbitrary thing. This is an average. And of course, some people can get their period back eating less. Some people are going to need to eat a lot more, but I like to give that number just as a visual because if somebody's eating 1,400 calories, they need to understand that like 1,800 calories isn't going to bring your period back. 2,000 calories probably isn't going to bring your period back. Like we do need to eat a lot more.
When you're coaching people on making that increase in calories, is that something that you usually have to like ramp them up gradually too? Because if somebody I know if somebody is used to eating something like 1,400 calories and then they immediately the next day try to go to 3,000 calories, they're probably going to feel like they're eating a ton. Is that something that they just have to change what they're eating so it's a little bit easier to consume that much, or do they need to ramp up, or a combination of both, or what does that look like?
That's definitely something we work out pretty closely with our clients, like inside my coaching program, because we're taking up to your point, if somebody's eating, 1,400 calories worth of rice cakes and, fat-free, sugar-free yogurts, like we can swap out food choices and increase the energy in their diet without really changing the volume. So that's something that we work really closely with our clients on because yeah, for sure. Like if you're trying to eat 3,000 calories worth of, broccoli and boneless, skinless chicken breast, like that's going to be hard and that's going to be really physically uncomfortable. So that, yes, making food swaps is a really important part of getting your period back. So going for things that are more calorie dense, probably temporarily cutting down on some of the higher fiber foods in your diet, and understanding like for our clients, there really is kind of this like 2-ish week adjustment period where it can be a little bit more uncomfortable, but also knowing that, within that 2 weeks, your digestion will probably start to improve. You'll probably start to have more regular bowel movements. Your metabolism will start to increase. And once that happens, you kind of have your hunger cues kick back on and it gets a lot easier to eat really what your body needs. But absolutely, there's an adjustment period. Do you approach it gradually or do you do it kind of all at once? For success rates on bringing your period back, it actually is better to try to get there as fast as possible. I know some people like to take the reverse diet approach, ideally and if you're doing a reverse diet, over the course of a week or two, I wouldn't recommend dragging it out month to month to month. I feel like a lot of times people are doing reverse dieting to minimize fat gain. But the reality of bringing your period back and getting your hormones back into balance is that your body does need to gain fat. So if you're doing a reverse diet, sometimes that can work against you or really prolong the process of getting your body back where it needs to be.
Gotcha. With limited time that we got left, I want to hit on a few more topics. I want to, in a second, talk about kind of like what you're doing what you, not necessarily what you're doing, but somebody who has appropriate hormone health and they don't want to be super specific with like tracking everything. What do you look at? But before we do that, let's talk about how hormones impact like burning calories or losing fat, because I know there are a lot of people who out there feel like it's harder for them to lose some body fat because their hormones are off. Talk to us about if there's truth to that, what the truth is or what it's not, and everything like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I think that hormones, there are a lot of different hormones in our body, right? So whenever people say, I can't lose fat because my hormones are off, what do they actually mean? Does it mean that because insulin's a hormone, right? Does it mean that you're insulin resistant? Absolutely. If you're insulin resistant, it's going to be really hard for you to lose body fat. Or does it mean that, you're amenorrheic, you have really low estrogen? That also too can impact your body's ability to lose fat, but kind of in a different reason. And there's kind of a different way where we go about, correcting those types of issues. So I think we have to first kind of ask the question, like go a little bit deeper, right? Because I know that that's a really like sexy topic on social media. It's like balance your hormones and lose weight. It's like, okay, well, what hormones and how are we going about it? But to speak a little bit more to like, the women that I work with and how like our female sex hormones can impact your body's body composition and ability to lose weight. Your metabolism is going to adapt to the amount of energy that it has. So if you have kind of dieted down eating 1,300 calories, you will probably notice that initially you drop body fat relatively quickly, and then you're probably going to stall out. And the reason that happens is because your metabolism has adapted to the low calorie amount that you've been giving your body. And so the only way to move past like a plateau, if you will, is to either stop being in a deficit and work on increasing your metabolism or to cut even lower. I would not recommend the second one. And I think that this is a trap that a lot of females and probably males too get into, is they don't understand that you actually have to eat enough to fuel your metabolism to work efficiently. And so the way that, hormones can impact somebody's ability to lose weight on the kind of restrictive side is when you eat that low, your body kind of goes into conservation mode. So it's not making hormones. It's not going to process food properly. It's probably going to hold on to a lot more energy from the calories that you're giving it than to properly process them and use them for body processes. Because when you lose your period or you cut your calories too low, it's not that it's not like it's just one body system that suffers. Your resting heart rate will probably be very low because your body doesn't want to expend extra energy on being more efficient there. Your body temperature lowers, your thyroid starts to suffer. So there's a lot of things that can kind of go on when somebody's under fueling that can impact their ability to lose weight. And I would say that kind of more of the root cause is the under fueling than the hormones per se. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, you have to originally find out what hormone is off, what the causation is, and basically go from there. For sake of time, I want to get to the last question, and it's basically if somebody either already feels like they're doing good from a hormone perspective and a nutrition perspective, or somebody had not been doing good and they restored themselves back to good levels of hormone health and stuff like that. What are the things that are easy to be aware of or keep track of, if you will, in order to make sure that you stay in a good place with your hormone levels and things don't get off?
Yeah. Well, I think that that's kind of a hard, for females, Nick, that's a little bit hard question to answer because it's going to kind of depend upon what your goals are. Like if you are somebody in your 20s and you are trying to prevent pregnancy, it might be smart for you to be on hormonal birth control. And when you're on hormonal birth control, you do not have a cycle of your own natural hormones. Your body is responding to the synthetic hormones in the pill. So I don't know that the answer is to like not be on birth control or always be on birth control. I think you need to decide what's right for you, but you do need to understand that when you come off hormonal birth control for reason X, Y, or Z, there might be some things that come up that you wouldn't have been aware of because hormonal birth control has been masking that. And I see that a lot with my clients with amenorrhea, is they're training so hard in the gym and they're eating super healthy. And then they're like, I think I'm going to come off the pill, or I'm ready to start my family. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I don't even get a period. So just kind of that tidbit that it can mask it. For people who aren't on hormonal birth control, just kind of like things to make sure that your hormones are balanced, or, first and foremost, make sure you're going to your annual checkup every single year. And know that you can request to have your hormones tested. Sometimes doctors really push back against this. But, you as the like, you're paying for it. Like, you should be able to request and look at that. And your doctor should take 10 minutes of their time to kind of explain to you what that means and what we're seeing. A lot of women don't necessarily recognize that they're having any sort of hormone imbalances until they're trying to conceive. So I would say, knowledge is power. Even if you're not ready to start your family like tomorrow, probably 6 months to a year in advance, coming off the pill, seeing what your cycle looks like. You can learn a lot by tracking your cycle about what your hormones are doing. And then also doing any sort of hormone testing, just so you kind of know what you're working with and you're not blindsided by potential hormone imbalance issues when you're like ready to be pregnant yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And so basically getting an idea of where you currently stand with your hormone levels. And then if things are good, just making sure that you're having balanced nutrition, getting all your macronutrients in basically at every single meal, making sure that you're doing the appropriate dosage of exercise that works for your body, I guess, and just being sure that you're not overdoing it or underdoing it on either one of those sides of the coin.
Right. Yeah. And exercise is kind of going to be like that Goldilocks scenario, right? Because like we don't want to like not exercise. That can cause other hormone imbalance issues, but we don't want to be overdoing it too. And so, yeah, I think that again, you can tell a lot by what's going on with your body by tracking your cycle. And so if somebody's super curious, I think that that's a relatively easy and inexpensive way to kind of get a closer look at how your body's doing.
Yeah. Last question then. I think any question with health and fitness is always, it depends, because it's very personalized and contextual with regards to who you're dealing with, what their history is, what their goals are, and everything like that. But if you were to try to give a general prescription of the appropriate dosage of exercise of maybe a female who's anywhere between early 20s to early 40s, and they're wanting to make sure that they just do a good exercise so they stay strong and they're cardiovascularly healthy and they're not overdoing it, not underdoing it, what would you say maybe is like the appropriate dosage of the type of exercise for someone like that? Again, knowing that we're not looking to be prescriptive for any individual person out there, it depends, but just kind of like generally speaking, what do you feel like is a good dosage for a lot of people?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll default to the American College of Sports Medicine's recommendation, which is 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous intensity. It's funny, Nick, because I used to be like, that is nothing. Like, we should be doing way more than that. And if you're 20 and you are really into fitness or you're training for something, absolutely, you can do more than that. But I do think that having learned what I have learned, there is such thing as too much exercise. That's a really good default. And understanding too that like during different life stages and different seasons, that amount might go up or down. But I think that that's a really good general target for any person. And I also think too, finding things that you enjoy doing, right? So like moderate intensity could be walking around your neighborhood. It could be strength training in the gym. It could be Pilates. It could be, it could be a lot of different things, but finding things that you enjoy, that's what you're probably going to be able to be consistent with. And to also understand that every time you go for a workout, it doesn't have to be like the most intense workout of your life. Like there's a time and place for that, to push yourself into PR and to, push your body, like absolutely. But like truly, we should not be doing that every single workout, every single day in the gym. And I think that that's where we start to enter into the overtraining.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We need to make sure that the expectation of the intensity of our exercise is not the same given different life circumstances, energy circumstances, sleep circumstances, stress circumstances, and all that kind of stuff. So I love it. Well, you guys need to make sure you go follow Lindsey on Instagram at food.freedom.fertility. She also, as I mentioned, has her period recovery plan on her or meal plan on her website, foodfreedomandfertility.com. That's a free download if you want to go on there and find that. And she also has a great podcast as well, the Period Recovery and Fertility Podcast, that you guys can go check out. Is there any other good place where people should go learn more about you and support you?
I would just say I'm most active on Instagram. So at food.freedom.fertility, I put content out every single day and have for 5 years. So there's a lot there. And then I also have blog posts, and there's great information if you're a podcast listener. Obviously, if you're listening to this, I have a podcast as well. So those are kind of like the best places to probably plug in and understand a little bit more about what I do. And hopefully it can help you in some way.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you guys, we just scratched the surface today on a bunch of these issues and topics. So make sure you go follow her, like we mentioned, on Instagram at food.freedom.fertility. I know you guys learned a lot today. Make sure you share this episode with a friend or family member who you feel like would get something from it, who might be experiencing some of these issues themselves. But share it. Make sure you're following the podcast. And other than that, Lindsey, that's all we've got today. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
I love that interview with Lindsey. She's so darn knowledgeable, and we just scratched the surface. If you're somebody who struggles to eat healthy and exercise consistently and pair those two together, and you're looking to lose maybe 5 to 15 pounds, you want to feel more in control of your health, you want to have lasting energy throughout your day, you want to form habits that you want to last a lifetime, then sign up for the April 22nd 10-week transformation so that you can feel and look like your best you in 10 weeks. We go from April 22nd to June 27th. All you have to do is go to nickcarrier.com/10WT to sign up today. You can join me in person in Nashville or from anywhere in the virtual 10WT. Again, go to nickcarrier.com/10WT to sign up today. Some of my biggest takeaways from Lindsey are the following. Number one, hormones are highly personal, as is honestly everything with regards to your health and fitness. There's never a one-size-fits-all approach, so we all need to be in constant discovery mode with what works best for us. Number two is over-exercising and under-eating is a surefire no-no. You might not be experiencing negative side effects if you're doing it right now, but it can come back to bite you. You want to ensure that you're not eating in a crazy calorie deficit and or for too long of a period of time. Remember, life has seasons, so should our health and fitness. Number three, by under-eating too much, the HPO axis, the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, signal can become too weak to properly produce hormones. Number four, make sure that you're eating balanced meals as frequently as you can. Having carbs, protein, and fat in most of your meals for most people is the way to go. Obviously, if you're dealing with other medical issues, then this could change. Number five, if you're looking to restore your hormones because you've been under-eating for a long period of time or maybe or over-exercising for a long period of time, you might need to increase your calorie intake to 2,500 calories a day or maybe 3,000 calories a day if you're going to continue to exercise. And then lastly, stick to a good baseline of 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise per week to ensure you're not over or underdoing it when it comes to exercise. You guys, hormone issues are no joke. If you're dealing with hormonal issues right now, I hope today helps you. I hope you learned something, and I hope you go follow Lindsey on Instagram so that you can learn more from her as well. I hope today serves you or someone you love to get closer to the healthiest version of themselves or the healthiest version of yourself, and ultimately closer to the best version of themselves and or closer and closer to your best you.